Chapter 1, page 58. A change of scene. After the war. A man and woman in a lecture hall. I'm sitting next to her at the lecture. She is bashful. Assiduously, she applies herself to noting the fact that the home of the original Germanic tribes was probably on the lower Danube, or somewhere or other. How should I know? I hear her breathing quicken, feel the warmth of her body, and smell the fresh scent of her hair. Her hand rests carelessly almost at my side, long, narrow, and white as freshly fallen snow. Under the man's gaze, the woman is transformed into something cold and dead. The man is Michael in Goebbels' post-World War I novel of the same name, who gazes at the hand of his beloved Herta Holk. Like so many women in these novels, she has the ability to evaporate as the story progresses. Relationships with women are dissolved and transformed into new male attitudes, into political stances, revolutions of the true path, etc. As the woman fades out of sight, the contours of the male sharpen. That is the way in which the fascist mode of writing often proceeds. It could almost be said that the raw material for the man's transformation is the sexually untouched, dissolving body of the woman he is with. To soldiers returning from battle, women seem to have lost their reality. Letau Vorbeck, Africanus, stops over in Italy. On his journey home, he visits a museum. In Rome, I was struck by a charming sculpture of Mars in repose. He has put sword and shield aside and is smiling wistfully as Cupid strokes his knee, eyeing him impishly. Colonel Trench has told me in Southwest Africa how overwhelming it would be to see white women after years of colonial warfare. Mythology had captured the ancient relationship between Mars and Venus with complete psychological accuracy. Leaving aside the fact that this is a beautiful example of the pomposity of Prussian officers' pronouncements on culture, it is striking that Letau unceremoniously substitutes a museum statue for the white woman. Colonel Trench had talked about, what is more, it is the statue of a man, Mars in repose. The relationship between Venus and Mars seems to Letau to have been captured with complete psychological accuracy, for the simple reason that there is no Venus present. For Cupid, who strokes the knees of Mars, is a boy. It is not sinking into the arms of real women that was one of the recurrent fantasies of the exhausted soldier in the trenches, but marching home through columns of jubilant women, in that he was later to be disappointed. Returning from the field, the Bremen regiment looked forward to parading into the city with full honors, as promised. Instead of bouquets and pristine maidens in white, they were met with machine guns, and the first moment of shock were disarmed. Pristine maidens in white, like Letau's statue or Goebbels' Snow White hand. Hands off. Whenever the possibility of sexual relations with women arises in these accounts, the writer takes pains to point out that nothing actually happens. Munich, May 1919. Searching for billets after the defeat of the Republic of Workers' and Soldiers' Council. No lover of luxury, I stood firm against the entreaties of a rich and charming widow from the Leopoldstrasse. She would enter my study to ask senseless questions, then make eyes at me. Instead, Rudolf Mann stayed at the home of a baron, where his bed was freezing. Women, like heating, are luxuries, at least when they are real, charming, and widows. Yet in retrospect, Mann could rave, as he recalled, images of women, and fantasize about fabulous quarters with women, whiskey, and cigars. And the only reference to women in another report we read, beyond that, we gained a true appreciation for the peoples of Munich, kind-hearted, upright folk whose female representation in particular spoiled us beyond reason. Female representatives gained a true appreciation. Their coffee and cakes may by all means be drowned in celebrations of victory, as long as a quick getaway is assured. We talked at length on that wind-whipped dike. We talked of many different things, but our secret whispering always ended on the topic of war and revolution. In the end, she shook herself and said, there you go again. I'm freezing, and we have to get home. I was annoyed that I'd spent all my time with this girl talking about those things, but that's how it was this time, and almost every time. The perception of the wind-whipped dike obscures the image of the companion who is simply a girl. The route of defense against feminine enticements travels from secret whisperings to war and revolution. That's how it was this time and almost every time, and this is how it often is in many variations in the text. The effect that appears destined for the woman as a love object takes a different turn, finds an image of violence, and couples with that. I plunge my gaze into the eyes of passing women, fleeting and penetrating as a pistol shot, and rejoice when they are forced to smile. Junger plays on one such coupling here. A pistol shot and a young girl's smile are brought into association, as if that were the most natural thing in the world. On the evening of a one-day leave from the war, Ernst Junger approaches a woman on the street in Brussels. She is married to a worker who is away at the front. He is invited into her home. It was an hour of oblivion stolen from the war. For that hour I am her husband. I have escaped from the circle of fire and sit in peace with her before the fireplace, hand in hand. Tomorrow, yes, tomorrow my brain may be shot to flames, so be it. As we part at the threshold, the wind and rain blowing through the door into the hallway, she says, Je ne t'oublierai pas. I will not forget you. She sounds genuine. I cross the bridge back into the city, my hands in my coat pockets and my head lowered. My spurs rattle each step of the way. He then meets a fellow soldier, and they go together to a cavern. We are by now worlds away from the laconic simplicity of a comment by Brecht on two strangers who find themselves spending the night together in the same room, and then love broke out between them. The moment of parting, as if he had to defend himself against the warmth of her breath. He feels wind and rain blowing into the hallway as she talks, just as Solomon prefers to perceive the wind-whipped dike as opposed to the movements of his companion's body. Junger snatches an hour of oblivion from the war, a loss which that war can surely take in its stride, and not a night shared by two warm, loving bodies. How is he to handle this woman? In holding hands with her, he deprives her of sensuousness, placing her within his fiction of a male-female relationship. This fraternal gesture, an adolescent defense ritual, both keeps her at a distance from his body and banishes the fear of having his desire returned by the girl, or vice versa. Walking hand in hand is, among other things, a sign of the incest taboo between brothers and sisters. The pompous declaration, I am her husband, makes him seem even more pathetic, and how easily he slips from the world of his desexualized idol to the eros of warfare. Tomorrow, yes, tomorrow my brain may be shot to flames. The scene closes with a further image of violence, a little more restrained this time. My spurs rattle each step of the way. Those are cold and threatening sounds, omens of bloody contacts. Junger was not essentially a cold man. One glance at his evocations of warfare is enough to show the immense trouble he takes to write of the encircling fire of the front as a series of gigantic eruptions of the senses. Yet the houses of Brussels' working-class woman is presented as a heaven of refuge from the encircling fire. Being with the woman actually frees him, momentarily at least, from threatening erotic thoughts. The class difference between them plays out in part in desexualizing the experience. Outside of a brothel, Junger, or indeed any other officer of the Free Corps or the Imperial Army, would certainly not have got too close to a working-class woman. At least not with benevolent intent. This woman has a husband at the front, a comrade at arms. Junger might shoot the man, but not deceive him. He speaks of him sympathetically. I picture him clearly, the simple Pelou, and feel like a brother towards him. No doubt he feels the burden of war as much as I do. We might soon be facing each other across the battlefield quite close without knowing it. Only our bullets whizzing overhead will almost touch. There are resonances of empathy between Junger and the absent husband, but with the wife there is only oblivion. Thor Guta's Captain Berthold turns down a similar opportunity for a quiet, peaceful time with a young French woman. Rudolf Berthold stands in the twilight, the fragrance of the last roses wafting through the door. It swings open. Is everything all right? Does he need anything else? The words drop gently, resonating. The girl steps up to him, leaning against the window. He perceives her outline dimly in the darkness of the room. He sees those eyes, senses that this girl is not hostile. He remains where he is, his hands gripping the windowsill. It is the last night of summer, the last night of fleeting youth, of youthful abandon. It would be good to forget everything, to press his face up against that of another. The heavy scent of the garden drifts into the room. The front is a distant irritation, then moves closer, a clear sound of blasting. The girl stands there, her head bent as if under some load. His eyes open wide. Berthold stares past the face, yet see it. His hands tighten around the wood, but still he feels this young woman who asks each evening whether he wants anything else, and will leave as gently as she has arrived. His voice is hoarse. No, thank you. Everything is in order. The girl takes a deep breath. For an instant it seems she is about to take another step towards him, the last step separating them from each other. The girl raises her hand, but only to say gently, Bonne nuit. Then she is gone from the room. Berthold stands motionless, rumbling deeply. Bomber squadrons speed toward the enemy. You must fulfill your destiny, not evade it, he tells himself. At least 3 motifs have counterpoints in the Junger text. Berthold senses that this girl is not in any hostile mood. His formulation implies that the opposite would normally be the case. Junger's impression of the working-class woman's parting remark, it sounds genuine, implies something more. Women, he assumes, will lie as a matter of course. In the Goethe text, too, the retreat from a possible sexual encounter leads into an image of violence. Rumbling deeply, the bomber squadrons speed towards the enemy. Finally, Junger talks of an hour of oblivion, while for Berthold it would be good to forget everything. Bodily love with a woman is associated with forgetting, and women are a means to that end. These men look for ecstasy not in embraces, but in explosions, and the rumbling of bomber squadrons, or in the brains being shot to flames. Berthold, having successfully escaped a woman, is reminded by sounds from the front that his destiny cannot be evaded in the same way. It is at the front, not in bed, that any future encounters will take place. The extent of Goethe's distance from the reality of love relationships becomes clear in his failure to inject any semblance of sensuousness into his writings. He becomes either ridiculous, sentimental, or trite, not to mention the fact that the woman, if she were more French reality and less German fiction, would probably have said bonne nuit. And what kind of conception of the female body is expressed in the formulation, his hands tighten around the wood, but still he feels this young woman, not thinks of, but feels. In defending himself against potential intimacy, Berthold transforms the female body into an inanimate object. Hands tightening around an object usually indicate fear of losing control, of fainting, conversely, of letting go and striking out. Or perhaps even in this case, the fear that bodily contact produces a lightning flash, a body